Hope you guys can see my screen. Hello?
Yeah, can see.
Okay, cool. So yesterday we saw the introduction, we saw why D365 use or what are its benefits, how do we get access, so just the basics of what we saw. So today let's get started with the actual creation and then we'll see how we can handle different scenarios within the system. Okay. So the first step what we do when we enter the FNO is to create legal entity. That's our step one. Okay. So to create legal entity from the home page, go to modules.
Bharat, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
What is legal entity here?
I'll explain what is legal entity. So go to it's basically your company. Okay, so you go to modules, then you go to organization administration. Okay, so in organization administration, here you will see organizations, legal entities. This is where we create legal entities. So legal entity basically it's your registered company. Let's say you're in a company, you want to implement a project. Let's say you pick one company. It could be any company. Let's say Nike. Okay, so Nike is an existing business, so they want to use D365 there for their operations. Now, as an implementation team, you understand Nike business. So here, for Nike to operate, we come here and create a legal entity called Nike. Okay, so legal entity is basically the company name. It's just a registered company name. So when you create that legal entity, when you post any transaction, we post legal entity specific transactions. Let's say there are different companies, right? So you select Nike, we create a legal entity Nike, and then we create all the modules within that entity. Okay, so that when you're posting transaction, what you need to post, what data, what reports you need to generate, it's all specific to that company. Okay, so that's why we create legal entity. So name, you can give any name here, legal entity name, and you see company here. This is a code. Okay, this is a 4-digit alphanumeric code. Okay, this is just a 4-digit code just to represent the name. Okay, so this is that alphanumeric code which we enter here, and then country or region, in which country does this company is registered. So that's your country or region. So this is a basic details which we need to fill. That's the name, the company code. This is 4-digit alphanumeric code. Okay, this could be anything, whatever they wish, you can just give that and then select the country. So these are the 3 details that we fill when we create legal entity, mandatory details. Okay, and then click OK. So this will create a legal entity in my environment. See, now you can see in the legal entity drop down, you can see there are a lot of legal entity available, and even Nike will be available now because I just created a legal entity. So these are all the different legal entities. Now each legal entity will have its own specific configuration. Okay, because based on their business requirement, they would do setup. So that will be specific to that legal entity. Now if you see Nike, so we just created a company. There is no other module existing here, right? So let's say you can also go to, let's say, AP. You go to AP here. Okay, let's say
Bharat,
vendors. Yes.
since you have taken the registered name of the company, we can write only registered name of the company or any company just as a demo we can prepare.
You can write anything. It's a free text. You can write ABC also. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say I'm just showing an example. Let's say you go to Windows. So currently, if you see, there will be no data because I've just created this entity now and I've not created any data. And therefore, any module you go, you will not see any data being available. Okay, see here. So in my Nike, there is no vendors. instead of Nike, let's say I'll select another registered entity. Let's say we go to USMF for USRT. So now within the same page, you will be able to see different details. Okay, so now if you see here in the vendors, these are all the vendors. So this data what you see here is specific to this entity. Okay, so that's why when you create entity, all the data that you create is entity specific. Okay, so currently we created Nike, and therefore everything would be blank as of now. So that's your legal entity. Okay, so let me go back to organization administration. So this is always the step one. So without creating legal entities, you will not be able to create any other data with for that. Okay, so let's go back here. Cool. So when you create legal entity, there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind. So we gave a name, code. Okay, uh, that's fine. Then you fill the language. This also is important because when you are posting transaction, for system to pick the language automatically, we need to enter language here. It's not a mandatory step, but it's good we select a language, so that will help in terms of posting. Now, the main thing that we need to keep in mind when we create a legal entity is localized functionality region. So when I say localized functionality region, what it means is, let's say in US, the tax system is different, where the accounting system is different. In India, the tax system is different. I'm just giving example. Likewise, each country will have their own specific requirement. So when you take US, let's say US has VAT. When you take India, India has GST. Okay. So how does the system understand that which tax system it should load, whether it should load the US tax system or whether it should load the Indian tax system? So to understand, for the system to understand this, you give localized functionality region. So this is the functionality that will tell the system that you need to pick the US local or Indian local. So here you can see here, deduct using company address. So ideally we always default to this. So what this does, whatever is my company address in terms of country, so that will be picked for the localized functionality. You can check the address here. Remember, when we gave those details, we gave USA, right? So now deduct using company address. What this does is that it will pick USA as the region, and whatever the USA requirement in terms of legal or even the tax, so the system will load that based on this. So load in the sense the modules what you see here. Okay, within those modules, whatever the requirements is that, whatever you see here, the tabs, so this will be all based on the US requirement that is controlled by localized functionality region. Okay, I will also show you an example how it differs. So currently what I have done, so currently if you see here, my localized functionality is detect using company address. My company address is USA, and remember this setup is done initially. Once the setup is done, you post even a single transaction, then you will not be able to change this setup. Okay, remember, even if it's a demo or production environment, once you post transaction, this can never be changed, because let's say you say USA, it will load all the USA requirements, and then you start posting transaction, then you can never go and change that. So just remember, this is one time setup and this is done at the very beginning stage. Okay, so let's say currently I've selected USA. So I will show an example how it differs in terms of tax at least. So in the modules, you can go to tax here. Okay, so currently it is USA, and if you see here under the setup, you can see sales tax, you can see foreign trade. Okay, so sales tax is basically for your VAT. So these details what you see here in the application is USA specific, and because I have given USA, you can see here this is a USA specific application. Okay, So now let's say I'll just change this just to understand. Let's say I'll change to India. Okay, save. I will not refresh the other tab, let it still be USA. So I will be able to show you the difference. So now what I have done, my localist functionality I have given as India. Okay, so now when you load the modules, it should be based on Indian requirements. Okay, so currently I have selected India. So let's go to the same place. So what I will open is go to modules, go to tax. Okay, now if you see here under setup, you can see sales tax, you can see withholding tax. There is no foreign trade. Now if you come back here, you can see sales tax, foreign trade. There is no withholding tax, right? So this is the difference between India and USA tax system. So how does the system understand that you need to load this or this is based on this setup? Okay, any questions?
Yeah. One legal entity will have a same tax structure, means like because company will not have in the one region, right? So
Correct.
one legal entity have a same structure, tax structure
Okay,
for
I'll come.
other countries.
Let's say Nike presents in multiple countries, correct? It's not just one country. So then what you do, you create one Nike for USA, you create one Nike for India, you create one Nike for different countries. It's like that because one legal entity can have only one system, one functionality local. You cannot include multiple within one legal entity. So that's why you create main companies, sub companies. Okay. So ideally, we should default it back to using company address. So yeah, so that's how you this functionality controls. Okay, this is something we need to keep in mind when we create our legal entity.
Can you repeat that point? The legal entity and the question she
What
asked.
Anna asked, right? Cool. So what she asked is, let's say Nike is present in US. Okay, so
Mhm.
for US, it will follow US taxation. Now, Nike is
Right.
also present in India.
Mhm.
Right? So she's asking, since it's there in India as well, how do you handle the Indian localization? So what I said is, you create Nike here with USA address. You create one more legal entity, new legal entity, and that would be for India specific. So you will post USA. See, because when you say USA, the vendors is different for USA. The vendors is different in India, right? Because you're operating in US. So you will have US vendors, US customers. When you're operating in India, you will have India customers and Indian requirement is different, US requirement is different. That's why you will have two different legal entities, one specific for US, one specific for India. And when you want to get one report combining both, that also can be done. That's a different process I'll cover later. But yeah, just to answer her,
Report can be generalized as company-wise for the reporting. The
yes.
currency will be different, and you can. Okay, I got that because we have in our company we have
Yeah.
that. Of
Okay.
our company Mexico and also in Canada and headquartered in US.
Okay.
So we haven't reported. So I think yeah, it makes sense. What you say it makes sense. All
Yeah.
right, got it.
So you can get one report and you can specify currency and based on exchange rate, you'll get that.
Yeah, currency you have to convert the currency to
Yes.
USA. We have to just convert the currency conversion when
Yeah.
we use the reports. But still, now what I'm not getting here in our company, we have one huge company
Okay.
in which is we call company. We don't call it a legal entity. We call company.
Okay.
Uh, but that is still now the data is everywhere
Mm-hmm.
in both in three country.
Okay.
Standard they can access that. in a different way as well. The order is goes in everywhere.
Mm.
And but I didn't get that how I didn't see anywhere data is for we're talking about the data, right? Data for
Yeah.
Canada and the data for USA is different.
Mhm.
I didn't see that.
Yes. Okay, which within the company you want to see, like what data you want to see with USA and Canada?
Look in our company,
Mm-hmm.
uh, entity is legal entity is a company, entity is a data, right?
Entities is not data. Entity will contain data. Yes.
Entity is a kind of table, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a table from backend. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we don't have it that. We don't have it such kind of data table or actually the backend when we talking about this, we're talking about AX database, right? Like
Yeah.
at the behind the database. When we come to technical part, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about database.
Mm-hmm.
We
Got
don't
it.
create a database for a different country, right?
I'm not sure how it's controlled in the back end, but I'll tell you what. So when you have one in USA, one in Canada, okay. So what you do, you create a third company where you'll not be able to post any transaction, but you can generate reports of USA and Canada merging. Okay, so there is a process for that. Probably I will show you how that works, but this
Okay,
is too
okay,
early to
okay,
show you
okay. I
that.
got
Okay.
it. I got it. Maybe you're right. Maybe the data inside the table is different row and whatever record is in terms of USA, maybe USA dollar, in terms of India, it is rupees, and but the table is the same. Have 5 column or 6 column, the same thing. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Got the point now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, this is with respect to creating legal entity. Any other questions? Okay, so you see other details here, like your contact information, your reporting. So this all, there is no mandatory to fill any of these things. It depends upon what data you're available with. Let's say the company says they will give one contact number, the email address, which you add here. And if they do have any register number, their bank account details, statutory reporting, whatever details they give you, you kind of update those details here. Okay. This is
Hello.
just for representation purpose. Yes, Rohit.
Yes, suppose that there is a corporate office, headquarters, and regional offices. Then which office address it will take as a correct get
You need to
contacts.
manually fill the address. So whichever address you want, you can add it. Adding contact information doesn't matter. Uh, so here also, if you have multiple address, let's say you want to add the second address. Now again, whichever address you add, the country will not change. Okay? The country remains the same. Okay? I just click add. That's for my second address. You can see the country is already defaulted to USA. You're
No, no,
not
no,
changing the country.
no, no, sir. Suppose that hey, this address is headquarter address. Suppose that corporate address some in India. So,
Uh,
then you have to change the address, na, sir.
Correct. Then let's say you will add India. But for since you are operating in US, you always need to default to US. Let's say if you want to use Indian address, Indian localization, then you select India. That's why you can see here there is one option deduct using company address, but at the same time you can always default to other countries as well.
No, no, no. My company is Nike, and Nike is in US and India also. But
Correct.
but the company's headquarter is in US, and some corporate are some other address in India. What will
That's what
is
I explained. No, you will have one for USA, one for India. So because you will operate in both the countries, you will operate in US, you will operate in India. India will have Indian requirements, US will have US requirements. See, Nike is present in around 100 plus countries. Okay, so you will have all the legal entities difference for each country. because each country will have their own tax requirement, each country will have their own operations, so you need to
Then
have specific data for those countries.
then we have to create two legal entities for Nike, one for
Yes,
US, one for Nike,
if you
and
have to, yes, if you are in 100 countries, then you need to create 100 legal entities.
got it, sir.
Yeah, that's with respect to legal entities. Okay, this is step one. Step two is called as number sequence. So when I say number sequence, these are all the unique identifiers for each record that we create in system. Let's say you create your vendor or you post any transaction, there'll be one unique number. It's like a document number, okay, so which will be associated with those things. That is called as number sequence in DT65. Okay, there is no other speciality in that. It's just a unique identifiers. Just by saying that number sequence, you understand, okay, it's for this each data or whatever action we do will have one number sequence associated with that. Okay, so you can manually create number sequence, or you can generate number sequence for all the modules in one go. Okay, there are two different options, and ideally the document number, there will be a lot of document number that picks for internally as well. So we should always generate number sequence once, and then you can edit it later based on the client specific requirements. So that I will cover later. So now we'll just see how we can generate number sequence. Okay, so to generate number sequence, this is step two: organization administration, number sequence.
Hold
Okay,
it 1 minute.
yeah.
Uh, what is the criteria to define number sequences? Something like basis we have to take, like ranges, something like, because every module will have a different sequence number. Some criteria to find how to get this number sequences.
You don't need to think of any criteria. System will
Mm-hmm.
automatically create it. Okay,
Okay.
now
Mm-hmm.
if client have a specific requirement in terms of they want this number sequence or this format, for those we can go and edit it. That also I'll show you, so that you can do later. At the initial stage, you don't need to worry about what number range or anything. You have to just generate the number sequence, and system will automatically take care of that.
Okay. Means like all modules it will take automatically.
Yes, all the modules. So
Okay.
let me show an
Thank you.
example. So initially, yeah. So let's say you go to accounts payable. So all the number sequence for that respective modules will be present in parameters. Okay. So let's say AP parameters. So here you can see number sequence. So go to number sequence. So currently you will see everything is blank. Okay, so this is in your AP module. Likewise, you can go to your AR module also. Again, the number sequence will be in parameters. So go to parameters. Okay, so here scroll down, number sequence. So let's go to number sequence. So you can see currently even AR module is blank. Okay, so every module will be blank. Now let's go and update the number sequence. So go to modules, organization administration, number sequence, then number sequence. Okay, so this will ideally take around 2-3 minutes, because it will create data for all the modules. So you can see generate. So click generate number sequence. So this ideally will take some time because it's creating data for all the modules. So let it be happening. So here you can see, so basically what it does is for all the modules, and it could be your AP, AR, GL, all the modules, all the number sequence, it will create it in one go, and then we can always go and edit based on the requirement. Okay, so edit part also will cover during the process. So let this be happening behind. Meanwhile, let's go to step 3. So step 1, legal entity. Step 2, we created number sequence. Now step 3, let's go and create fiscal calendar. Okay, so do you guys understand what is fiscal calendar?
Yes, like in India, from 1st April to 31st March, the fiscal calendar.
Correct. In India, we follow that. Each country will have their own requirement. USA generally it's June to July. Okay, so each country will have their own thing. So fiscal calendar is nothing but your company's calendar year. Okay, so from like when to when you will operate. So which you will consider as one full year because you will have all the transaction associated with that, closing books, different things will come into picture. So each company will have their own specific fiscal year. Okay. So now this number sequence is generated here. Next, click next. So here you can see which module number sequence is created. Like you can see accounts payable. Uh, Defaultly, if you see here the format Nike, so what it does, it picks your company code and then a specific format. So number ranges, it will automatically pick. We don't need to worry on that. You can see AP, then you have AR. So for all the modules, it will generate in one go. So then again, click next. See here, accounts payable 143 AR 131 advance. So you can see so many being associated with this. Okay, so click finish. So this will finish adding number sequence for all the modules. This also will take some time. So let's go and create our fiscal calendar. Okay, so to create fiscal calendar, go to general ledger, then you have calendars. So here you will see ledger calendars, fiscal calendars. So ledger calendars will come later. So ledger calendars will come to open and close. So this I will cover later. So every time we need to create fiscal calendar. Okay, this is where the calendar is controlled. So GL calendars, fiscal calendar. So let's go to fiscal calendar. Now, when you come to fiscal calendar, here you can see the list of calendar. Okay, so you can see so many calendars being already present. So what this means is calendar when you create is not legal entity specific in the sense, let's say I'll create one calendar now. I will name it as Nike. That calendar can be linked with your Nike company or any other legal entity that is present here. Okay, so it is not legal entity specific. Once you create a calendar, we need to link calendar with my company, and one calendar can be associated with multiple legal entities. Let's say here we have Nike India, we have Nike USA. So ideally, you said that April to March is India's fiscal calendar. That is for India's financial. It doesn't mean that the company should follow that calendar. Okay, let's say you have Nike. Nike's headquarters is in USA. So they follow Jan to December. Okay, then you can create one calendar. Let's say you have Nike in different countries, but every country can be associated with one calendar so that everyone will follow the same financial period. So when you generate report also, it will be easy. When you say Jan to December, it will come report from all the different countries, legal entities as well. So that's why the calendar that we create is a global specific. Okay, it's not entity specific. So how do we create new calendar? Click new calendar here. Okay, so give calendar name, it could be anything. I'll just give the company name so that it's easy for us to understand. Okay, so this is a free text. You can enter anything you want. There's no restrictions on what you need to enter. Okay, start of fiscal year. So when do you want to start your year? When do you want to end your year? Okay, that's what these two fields will specify. It can be Jan to December, April to March, June to July. Entirely depends upon how company wants to operate. Okay, then you give the year name. Currently we are in 2022, so I'm selecting 2022. So you need to understand these two fields. Okay, so some companies, what they do, they say every month is one period. So we have 12 months, will have 12 periods. So unit month length of period is 1. That means every 1 month is considered as 1 period. So some will say every 30 days I want to consider as 1 period, irrespective of whether it has 30 days or 31 days or February being 28 days. It doesn't matter. I want 30 days to be considered as 1 period. This is very rare scenario, but it's a possibility. Then you can see your days, length of period. Let's say I'll give 30. Then what happens? Every 30 days will be considered as 1 period. So likewise, you can configure this in different ways based on the business requirement. Ideally, everyone will follow this 1 month. Okay, but in case if they have different requirement, we can always go ahead and configure based on the requirement. Okay, and then click create. So this will create my fiscal calendar. So you can see calendar name Nike 2022 year, and here you can see period 1 Jan 1st to Jan 31st, because every month is one period, right? So period 1 to period 12, so that will be Jan to December. So this will be automatically created by system once you give the detail. So this is how we create fiscal calendar. Any question on this? Okay.
Okay, sir.
So now you can see the numbers being created. So now once it's generated, just to verify, you can go and check the number sequence. Let's say AP, then with the setup parameters. So here, when we initially saw, the number sequence was blank. Now we generated number sequence. Now you can see number sequence being updated. So this will be updated for all the modules once you generate number sequence. Okay. So these are the three basic steps what we created: legal entity, number sequence, fiscal calendar. So let's move forward. So let's go for financial dimensions. Now this financial dimension is important to understand. So anyone have idea what is financial dimension?
Different departments, maybe.
Yeah,
Of
you're kind of close. It is departments, yes. Um, so as you said, dimension. What is the purpose of creating this dimension? It's basically for reporting purpose. Okay, so there is no additional functionality. The main purpose of creating dimension is for your reporting purpose. Let's take one example. Let's take college as an example. Okay, so let's say college will have an admission fee. College will have admission fee. Let's say the college will receive 1 lakh admission for fee. Okay, now here, so college understood for this particular year, the admission fee I have received is 1 lakh. Okay, so this is all. This is the data. When you post, you get it. Admission fees you post, then you got 1 lakh. Now here, the college will say, I want to understand. Let's say the college will have. I'm just taking an example. Let's say it has HR, finance, and maybe marketing. Okay, so these are all different departments, correct? Now for organization or the administration, it's important for them to understand within this 1 lakh how much is coming from HR, finance, and marketing, so that they can understand which department is performing well, which departments they need to look to improve. So to understand these details, they should understand what is the values coming from each department. Let's call this as department. So when I say department, this is my dimension. Okay, department is one of the dimension. Likewise, in organizations, you will have different. You can have departments. You can have cost center. You can have different values. Okay, but this department, what you call, is called as my dimensions. Now within department, I have HR, finance, marketing. Right? These are my dimension values. When you select a dimension, when you're posting now, when you're posting admission, first you will select dimension, that is your department. Okay, once you select your department, the department will have your dimension values like HR, finance, and marketing. Okay, now what you can do, you will split this one, like now for college, when you receive this admission fee, the total amount will not change. Okay, what this does, it's only telling me from where the amount is coming. The total amount is not changed, right? So there is no financial impact from dimension. All that dimension is doing, it's breaking up the details. So that's why the dimension is mainly used for reporting purpose. So here, let's say I understand from HR I'm getting 20,000. Let's say I'm getting around 50 from finance. Okay, 30 from marketing. So my total amount will never change. But now I understand my HR is doing okay, finance is doing good, marketing also is kind of okay. So that it helps me to focus on the particular department to improve. So to get these details, we make use of dimension when we're posting transactions. Okay. So this department, what you create is your dimension, like let's say department, then you can have cost center. Let's say I will name it as cost center. So this becomes your next dimension. Now within cost center, you can say admin department or different names. This becomes your dimension values. Okay, so is the concept clear before we go to system?
Cost center, what do you mean by cost and department? We can get it, but cost center means like which kind of companies they generally prefer to have cost center?
See, the cost center name they give, it's the functionality between department and cost center is one and the same. But since it will incur expense, it will incur cost, right? So they name it as cost center. That's it. So in legal, generally most of them, instead of calling it as department, so even Nike, in fact Nike also calls it as cost center. Basically, you are incurring some cost for that particular center, right? So they call it as cost center. That's it.
I just want to know because since the company has having two kind of costs, like operating cost and expense cost.
Expensive cost,
So
yes.
for the both the things, they will mention like a different dimension. I'm little bit means like what kind of criteria they will follow to have this dimension, like
See,
for
uh,
every. Hmm.
yeah, whether you're having your operating expense or your capex expense, it's coming from one particular department, right? Or from one set of team. So I'm not changing for opex and capex. I'm not having a different cost center. So whether it's opex expense or capex expense, it's coming from one place. So I'm named that as cost center. So let's say you pick, I'll give an example. Let's say you have an organization. Okay. Now you have AP team who will book your invoice, who will book your whatever these things. So for that AP team, you call it as cost center. Okay. Now their operating expense. So you need to pay them the salary, then you need to pay them some incentives or those things, that becomes your opex expense. Let's say you need to give them laptops, machineries, right? So that becomes your capex. Okay, both is coming from AP department. So I'm just naming cost center AP, and whether it's opex or capex, I'm posting to that. Now I have my AR department, that would be my second cost center. Okay, and for again opex or capex expense, that doesn't matter to me. I'm putting in that department. That's how it works.
Okay. So in the two buckets only, all these expensive cost centers will go in the financial dimension, AP and AR only. Like
Yes,
even the expenses of HR, all this means expense management, we can say. So this two only it will go in the company, AP
yes.
and
In
AR.
case if you have only two, in case if you have two, if you have multiple, you can distribute it based on that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's your dimension and dimension values. So any other questions?
Hello,
Yes.
could you please explain again what is the financial dimension?
Okay. So when I say financial dimension, It's basically used for reporting purpose. Okay. So what we do, let's say you're posting one transaction for a college, you have an admission. That's your income, right? Admission fee from students. So for that particular year, let's say you received 1 lakh as your admission fee. Now, as a organization, I want to understand from which department. Like in colleges, you have your different departments, right? HR, finance, marketing. This is just an example what I picked. So here, you want to understand how much is coming from my HR, how much is coming from finance in terms of admission fee. Okay, how much is coming from marketing. To get these details, we make use of financial dimensions. So probably when we create a system, we will understand it in better way. Okay. So let's go to system and create dimension. And when we post transaction, you will get a much better idea of what is financial dimensions. Okay. So to create a financial dimensions, we need to go to general ledger. Okay. Collapse all. So here, general ledger, chart of accounts, dimension, financial dimensions. So this is where we create financial dimensions. Okay, GL, chart of accounts, dimensions, financial dimensions. So let's go to financial dimensions. Now, so what happens here? So you can see here, when you create your financial dimension, because it will impact your posting, you cannot straight away activate a financial dimensions. To activate financial dimensions, you need to put the environment in the maintenance mode. Generally, the technical consultants will do this. So you will put the system in the maintenance mode, and only then you will enable the dimension from LCS. Okay, so I'm not sure if any who's the has anyone done this being technical consultant? Okay,
No, I haven't done.
okay, but yeah, ideally it's done from that way. So here you can see there's already existing dimensions. Okay, so we can always make use of the existing dimension because you can create a new one, but you cannot activate it straight away. You need to do that from the backend. So let's see how we can create dimensions. Okay, so click new. So when you say use values from, here you see different things. Okay, so what is this? We'll come to this later. I will explain. They said there is custom dimension, there is derived dimension. So let's come to that later. Once we go to transaction, we'll come back to understand what this is. So currently I'm just selecting custom dimension. Now when you give a dimension name, make sure it's not duplicate. Let's say you can see bank account that's being already there. Now if you enter bank account, okay, this will still be, this is derived, maybe that is not derived, so system might allow. No, you can see here the dimension name exists on other financial dimensions, so the dimension name cannot be duplicate, it should always be unique. Okay. So let's say AP Nike, just to be unique. So save. Now it will allow you to save. See. So, and you cannot give space also. Let's say if you give space, that also will throw an error. See, so you cannot, the space also is not allowed in the dimension name when you're creating it. Cool. So I created a dimension. Currently, you can see this is inactive. You can never make it active. Activate because if you click activate here, you can see the system is not in the maintenance mode. So when you're using the system, you will not be able to do this. You need to go to the backend, turn the environment off, so that when you do that, no one can access this environment, and only then you can activate the dimension, because it will impact the overall system, right? So you cannot straight away do this. So you can create a new dimension for practice purpose, but for posting transaction, kindly make use of the existing one, because we cannot activate this. You cannot use this for transactions. So for transaction, kindly use, see, there are active cost center on department, so kindly make use of these two. Okay, or you can search others. You have so many things which is active, whichever is active, make use of that. But I'll show how you create dimension name. So let's say we created a dimension. Instead of department, I have given AP Nike name. Okay, Now go to dimension values. Okay, so click on dimension values. So what is dimension values? So whatever you create inside one department, let's say instead of department we created a department. Now I need to create my dimension values. So click new, and you can get an option to create dimension value. Let's say HR. I'm going to create HR here. So once you give the value here, now you can see this gets activated. So active from and active to, basically from which date to which date you want this department to be active, that date you fill here. In case you don't have any date restrictions, you want to make use of this, like you don't have any date restriction basically. So for every transaction you just want to make use of this dimension value, then you can leave this as blank. So when you leave blank, it will be active throughout. Okay. When you give a date, then it will be active only for that specific date. Next, suspended. Let's say you create this dimension value. So it's always advisable not to delete the dimension value once you post any transaction. So in case you understood the dimension value we're not going to use in future, then you can come and suspend this. Okay. So instead of deleting it, you can just straight away come and suspend this. So group dimension is used for consolidation. So we'll do these things later. Okay. So again, these are all not mandarism, but it's important to know. So you can have specific date activation for your dimension value. You can also suspend. So legal entity overrides. So this concept, okay, I will cover in depth later, but I'm just explaining how it does. You guys asked that Nike USA, Nike India, correct? Now I created this financial dimension, and I want to make use for only Nike US, not for Nike India, using the same dimension for Nike India, Nike dimension, Nike US. For both, I have same cost center, but within that, specific values is for USA, some values for India. Then you can use this concept. So we'll cover this later because it's going in depth. I don't want to confuse as of now. So we'll come back to those things later. But yeah, this is how you create your dimension values. Okay. So you can just click new. You can create any number of dimension values. There's no restriction on the number of values you can create. So this is how you create dimension values.
Hi, Bharat.
Yeah.
I want to know the financial dimension for every legal entity. There is not like a specific dimension, just since you have mentioned like physical calendar, one for all legal entities, right?
Correct.
Mm,
Yes.
and if you're talking about the financial dimension for every region, there will be a different kind of setup for the
Not
financial dimension.
Not necessary, not necessary. If you see here, this also is not legal entity specific. This is also created at global level. So whatever we are creating currently, it's all global level. One dimension can be associated with multiple legal entities. Okay, so
If India has eight financial dimension, US will also have a eight financial dimension same.
it can possibly, if they want to make use of. That's why I said that same dimension name, but within that the values can be different for US and India, but you can make use of the same dimension. So you created a dimension here. So far we created fiscal calendar, we created financial dimension. Nothing is being associated with my company Nike. Okay, let's say I'm in Nike now. Let's go to different legal entity. Let's say I will go to USRT. So if you come to the same page, you will still see the same data. See here, you still see AP Nike we just created. Even if you're coming to this legal entity, you will see. Okay, so you need to understand the fiscal calendar or your dimension. Next step, whatever I show, I will explain that. Okay, it's all global specific. It's not entity specific. Once you, when I say global specific, it means that you can use that for multiple legal entities. That's why it's called as global. Okay, so this dimension what we created is also global. How do we associate it with my company? We'll cover that later. let's just see the concepts and then we'll come to that later. Okay. Okay, now that we still have 8 minutes, I cannot go to the other one. So here I'll explain you one more thing. So when we click new, here you see use values from, right? So there are two types of dimensions. One is derived dimension, custom dimension. The other is derived dimension. Okay. So what is the difference between these two? So the functionality remains same. Let's say you have dimension, you have derived. Don't bother too much, because once we go to transaction you will start understanding this is just to to understand when you're creating it. Okay. The other is custom. Now as the name suggests, custom, when you use custom, you can see the name here. Okay. You can give any name you want, there is no restriction on what name you give. Okay. And also, like we saw our AP Nike, when you give your custom dimension name, you can also create dimension values. If you go to dimension values, see here you have new button enabled, so you can click new and keep on creating the dimension values manually. That is when you use custom dimensions. So what is custom dimension? You can manually create dimension values. You saw here we created Nike. You can go inside here for values and you can use any dimension values manually. Now there is another concept called as derived dimension. Let me take one example here. Okay. Now if you see here, the use values from is cost center. Okay. So when you say cost center, now you go to dimension values. Now you can see here the new button is disabled. So what basically it means is it's deriving the value from another entity. So you can see the values here. You can derive the value from bank accounts. Let's say in the system you will create a bank accounts. Okay. My company has 3 bank accounts, so you create 3 bank accounts, so you can derive value from. So in case if you select here bank account, I think this already exists. So now if you go to dimension values, you will not be able to create new bank. There's a module called bank account. If you go to that module, create a particular bank, that will automatically come here as a value. So you're basically deriving the value from other places. Okay. I will also show an example how it's done. Let's say cost center. So currently what I'm doing, cost center is an operating unit which is there in the system. So the dimension values I'm deriving from that cost center. So currently you can see there are so many values, but I cannot create new. In case I want Nike as a value. Okay. So how do you create a dimension value for cost center is, so we need to go to operating units. Again, within the organization administration, same path when we created our legal entity. So organizations, here you can see operating units. This is because I'm using cost center. In case if you have bank accounts, you can also have workers, you can also have vendors. Okay. There are different options. I think you will start understanding that when we go into that respective module. You go to AP module, you create a vendor. Then if the dimension value is derived from vendors, all your vendors will become dimension values. Okay. So basically I'm just explaining the concept here. So the derived values is your deriving values from other place. So let's say cost center values we need. So you go to operating units. Okay, let's create one cost center operating in the operating units here. Not sure what is the issue. Okay, so it's back here. So let me go back to operating units. Okay, here let's go to operating units. Click new. So here now I want to see cost center, right? So I'm going to select cost center. You can see the cost center number. It will be automatic. Let's say I will name it as Nike. Save. So the cost center number is 252. Now come here, refresh. So now you can see 252 Nike. Okay, so this will be part of your dimension values. So you don't have the option of creating new, but you're deriving these values from other place. So we created cost center in the operating unit, and you can see this is automatically coming as my dimension value here. So that's what your derived dimension values is derived. This is the difference between custom dimension, derived dimension. So financial dimension, dimension values, then it has custom dimension, derived dimension. Okay, so let me brief of whatever we did so far. Quickly, let's do that. So in the step one, we created legal entity. When you create legal entity, it's basically the registered company, and also you will give a 4 digits here. What you see, it's an alphanumeric code. That's your company code. When you create your legal entity, what we need to the point that we need to keep in mind is the localized functionality, because the application or the different modules is loaded based on the localized functionality what we select. That's in your legal entity. The second step is number sequence. Number sequence is basically unique identifiers for each record that we create in the system. So we generated number sequence. So that number sequence will be generated for all the modules. Later we can customize based on requirement, but for now we have generated number sequence for all the modules. Step 3, we did fiscal calendar. Fiscal calendar is basically your financial calendar of the company. It can be anything like Jan to December, June to July, depends upon the company. And also you can create different periods. You can create every month as period, every 30 days as period, again depends upon business requirement. So we created Jan to December as my fiscal calendar with every month being one period. Then we went to financial dimensions. So financial dimension is basically used for reporting purpose. So it will give in-depth details of the transaction. So that will help the administration to understand the specific within the company. And in dimension you have two types. You have derived dimension, you have custom dimension. In custom dimension we can manually create dimension values. In derived dimension the values are derived from different based on whatever you select, like your operating units or your bank account, your vendors. So depends on what you select, the values will be derived from another place within the legal entity. So that's called as financial dimensions, derived dimensions. Yeah, I think this is what we covered today. Yeah, I think time done. That's it for the class today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.